welcome to the temple. Let's demystify the Rose lineage a little bit. I know for myself, when I started on this path of the Magdalene Priestess and following the Rose lineage, there was a lot of information and it was quite overwhelming to unpick and, as Megan Watson would say, kind of follow that red thread. So I want to talk about the kind of history, how we can trace this back in history and where we see it today as the Rose lineage. So the first thing that I want to just point out is that the Rose lineage is not a particular teaching or practice or belief system that has a coherent message that you can find as an unbroken line throughout history. The Rose lineage is a living tradition and it is ever evolving, and that is how it has progressed throughout history, kind of like a snowball rolling down a mountain, building as it goes. So the rose, the first sort of incarnation of the rose that we actually find is in the planet Venus, as we call her today. As she makes her orbit over the course of 8 years, she traces a geometric shape in the sky that looks like a 5-petaled rose. And back when our ancient ancestors were actually able to see the stars a lot better because they didn't have all the light pollution that a lot of us deal with today, they really used the stars to give meaning to their existence. And when they looked up at Venus, they saw that bright star in the sky, and they saw that at different times she would either appear in the morning or the evening, and she had the ability to make that crossover of being a deity of the upper world and a deity of the lower world, the underworld. And so with the goddess Inanna, who makes that journey, she is the queen of heaven and earth, but Inanna makes that journey to the underworld, to her dark sister Ereshkigal. And usually when people go to the underworld, they don't come back again. But the Venus star, or Inanna, she does. So she goes to the underworld and she comes back again. And in Sumerian iconography, we often see an 8-petaled rose, which again mirrors the 8-year cycle that it takes for Venus to make that rose shape in the sky. And the other thing to note is that back then, roses didn't really look how they look today, you know, the garden variety, the cultivated rose. They were much more like the wild roses, like the dog rose, for instance, that we have still today. But that's kind of what roses looked like more. They were beautiful and they had a gorgeous scent, but they were, you know, in this kind of thick bramble of thorns as well, which also echoes Inanna's nature as goddess of sex and war. So really for me, that is kind of where the Rose lineage begins. Over time, obviously we know that cultures and deities merge and we eventually get to the goddess Venus. You know, the rose is kind of passed down to Venus. A big symbol of Venus is the rose. Like when she was born from the ocean, the foam was formed. White roses were formed out of the foam of the ocean when Venus was born. When her lover Adonis died and she was crying tears, they stained the white roses red. And the next kind of person that was past that rose baton, if you like, for me was Mother Mary. And this is where it kind of, the church kind of comes in and distorts things a bit. So for me personally, Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene are the divine feminine kind of split apart. So we have Mother Mary, who's the nurturing, the pure, the very sort of stereotypical feminine motherly aspects that are, you know, lauded in society. You know, that's, if you're a woman, like, you know, you need to be that, because if you're anything else, you're going to be kind of shunned and ridiculed. And that's kind of where Mary Magdalene comes in, as if we see her and if we're allowed to accept her as the consort to Yeshua, we see in Mary Magdalene the more independent woman. You know, she's not a girl, she's not a mother yet, she's in that space where she's really coming into her sovereignty, and if we can see her as the divine consort to Yeshua, that, you know, in the story of the gods and goddesses that we have, you know, Yeshua is kind of like an oddball because he doesn't have his divine consort, except, you know, that he does in Mary Magdalene. So Mary Magdalene is that more consort but also sovereign feminine as well. And I believe that if the church hadn't got its hands on the message, the true message of Christ, the Christed one, the message of love and inclusion and equality, that actually the divine feminine would have looked slightly different in that setup than it does in the church's Christianity. So with Mother Mary, there are lots of kind of legends to do with her and roses. She's called the Rosa Mystica in the Litany of Loreto, and one of her myths or legends, if you like, is that she appeared to a man and in the middle of winter, and to make sure that a chapel or a church was built there, she knew she would have to provide some kind of miracle to the local bishop to make him do that. So she set this man off to go and find roses in the middle of winter, and he was like, how am I going to do that? And obviously he found them and he bundled them up in his robes, and he got to the bishop and he was like, look, you know, Mother Mary sent me with these roses, and they fall out of his robes, and an imprint from the roses have created an embroidered image of Mother Mary within his robes. So with Mother Mary, we have these direct links to the rose where we can see that sort of unbroken line, if you like, of the rose as a symbol of the divine feminine coming down. And then when we get to Mary Magdalene, which the Rose lineage is today so linked with, we don't really have the same in terms of these legends and myths from, you know, thousands of years ago being linked to her in the Gospels, or in the canonical Gospels or the Gnostic Gospels, and sightings of her. We don't have that as much as we do with the other goddesses. And I do see Mother Mary as a goddess, and I see Mary Magdalene as a goddess as well, the goddess that never was, because Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene weren't allowed to be goddesses, but to me they are. So with Mary Magdalene, we don't really have that direct baton passing of the rose, because for me, you know, I think that the church got in the way of that lineage of goddess creation, if you like, goddess birthing, that Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene would have been, you know, the next kind of goddesses. We do have the really famous legend with Mary Magdalene and the egg, where she goes to the court, I think of Tiberius, I can't remember his name, and she's kind of proclaiming to the court, look, you know, Yeshua's risen. And the emperor says, you know, there's as much chance that Yeshua has risen as this egg turning red, and the egg immediately turns red. So again, it's like, that's the red thread, like right, why red? And this is where it can get a little bit confusing, I think, with the Rose lineage, because we can't look directly back in history and say, oh yeah, I can see how the rose kind of passed down. But this is why it's a living lineage, and this is why we are, or part of the reason why we are here, to revive this baton passing of the Rosa Mystica, the rose mysteries, the path of beauty, the path of grace, of love, unconditional love that includes all, that is embodied in the rose, right? And so as the rose itself is passed, the rose itself actually evolves. And so we have, in the language of flowers, you know, different colors of roses mean different things, just like different colors of different flowers mean different things. And a lot of people link the colors of the chakra to the different roses as well, and working in that way with the rose. We can also see the rose as a symbol of the yoni, right? Because of the undulating layers of the petals that mimics the anatomy of the female body, the yoni. And although we don't directly have any links to Mary Magdalene, and the yoni, womb healing, yoni healing, etc., unless you subscribe to certain things that have been written, you know, channeled things that have been written in books. We don't have anything in history, in the Gospels, in Mary Magdalene's Gospel, to say that she was directly linked to that work. But what Mary Magdalene represents for me is the suppression of the feminine, of the entirety of the feminine, as the feminine as a spiritual leader, as a spiritual guide. You know, when Peter is trying to shut her up, when he says, you know, this woman talks too much, she needs to leave, she's not welcome here, she's not worthy of this spiritual life. You know, women being denied in that way. And also of Mary Magdalene's role as the consort to Yeshua, just a normal thing, you know, that like Yeshua had a wife, it was Mary Magdalene, but no, because women, you know, Yeshua is so pure, how could he be defiled by a woman? You know, this kind of suppression of the feminine sexuality that is Mary Magdalene's story as well. So for me, when we do that work with the Rose lineage of yoni healing, womb healing, coming into our sexual sovereignty, that's really how I see that it's been passed to Mary Magdalene, for her archetype to be used when we do that work. The Rose lineage is, I mean, there's so much more to it as well. It's not really a line. The Rose lineage, the Rose line, it's not a line, you know, just like a rose is not linear, you know, it's like a mandala, you know, or a labyrinth, kind of following the undulations of the rose. That's the Rose line's journey, and it's still evolving today. And because of that undulating, non-linear but cyclical, labyrinth-like nature of the rose, that does make it difficult to follow coherently. So if you would like to work more closely with the rose, I have a free 5-day Magdalene Priestess immersion available. The details will be in the description of this video and in a pinned comment. We work closely with the soul of the rose, rose medicine, Mary Magdalene working with you to give you that rose medicine to help you start to cleanse wounded areas, help you with healing with the rose medicine. We also work very closely with Mary Magdalene, working to understand her in a simplified historical sense. We delve into our spiritual depth with the sacred number 7, the story of Inanna. We work with the symbolism of the Grail, and we have a Grail anointing ritual in there as well. So if you feel called to that free gift, the details will be in the description and in a pinned comment. I hope this has helped demystify the Rose lineage a little bit, and that it has illuminated the path for you somewhat. Thank you so much for being with me today. Many blessings.